Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of That's Initiative. I'm your host Chris, and joining me as always is Greg. So, hey Greg, how are you doing today?
Hey, Chris. Hello, internet world.
Yeah. So we put up a poll on the Dice Hate Facebook page for this episode for the topic, and party composition won by a long way. So we're going to be talking party composition today. I thought we'd hit the generalities of party composition, starting off with D&D, then touching a couple of other role-playing games and archetypes. So, what are your general thoughts about party composition, with D&D specifically in mind? I suppose, do you think of the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon where you need the barbarian, the fighter, the wizard, the rogue? Is that the ideal party composition still, or has the game moved on?
Uh, well, I guess from the game master's perspective, I don't think it matters. I think you've got a head start if the players are playing characters that they want to play. So, I mean, you can weave it however you want. So I don't think it really matters as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's obviously nice uh, if they have all their bases covered, but it's not. I don't think it harshly penalizes them if they don't.
Yeah, I know for myself, generally speaking, I don't think there's an ideal party composition anymore. I think most role playing games, especially like the modern era, are designed that, like you say, you just want them playing whatever they want, so that they're engaged with your content. And I know like we've touched on it in the past, and I remember talking about Colville's video where he did the train track versus the sandbox, where he's talking about oh, we're all going to play dwarves, and then one of them turns up and it's a hobbit, obviously describing the Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that kind of thing is cool if everyone buys into doing the same kind of character, or like the same race, same. Like, I think you could do a really cool game where everyone's a thief and you're a member of a thieves guild. I think you can weave your tale around different things and work it to your players.
Yeah, there's like a really cool evil hat game. Now I can't remember what it is, where you're all basically thieves
Yeah,
and you're playing like a company thieves and it's like a thieves guild type game. Yeah, so I think as long as it really comes down to the players. So there's some players that have issues when somebody else is playing the same class because they feel like they're having to share the limelight, I guess, when it comes to their special skills. They don't want, if you're a thief, they want to be the ones that unlock check for traps and unlock the doors, and they feel like that if somebody else is doing it, but that's really up to that particular player. As a game master, I don't think it really matters.
yeah. I think one of the main things for party composition generally comes down to like more combat focused games where you try and meta game. Like, it said, you need the healing class in there? Do you need a tank? Like, people think of it, I think, and I fall into the same trap of a World of Warcraft raiding party, that kind of thing,
Right.
where you want to tick all of these boxes so that you can handle all the problems. But I don't think it's necessarily the same beast actually playing a true role playing game compared to a WoW or something like that.
Well, it does definitely change the way the encounter is. You go through the encounter. So, like from my perspective, if you don't have a healer, every fight you guys get into is effectively a rush. You're trying to out damage the enemy before you guys run out of hit points. Whereas if you have a healer in your party, the rush isn't so imminent, but you lose out. You're you're losing out on a substantial like one person's worth of damage, so the fight is inevitably going to take longer.
Yeah. So what about different kind of games? And I know you recently tried out the new Call of Cthulhu edition. What about like a game like that where it's very much a different beast to a D&D? How would you like think of party composition in that style of game?
Well, I don't. I think they have different titles. The characters, because they all come from the same skill pool and there's no restriction. So you get X number of skill points you get to spend over your character. So whether you're an investigator or a professor or a mechanic or whatever it is, there's no class specific skills, so to speak, right? So everybody's got the same skill pool, and there's a lot of I think like sort of briefly going back to D&D, but it like
Yeah.
it's on the same tangent. Uh, one of the like least used things is the like help action where you get to help someone else in your group to give them advantage. So there's a lot of the collaborating in Call of Cthulhu where you pool up your resources and then they use their mechanic where instead of advantage in D&D, you get to reverse the dice,
Yeah.
right? So if you roll a 27 or 72, it becomes a 27 and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So because there's very little combat, well, there can be combat, but it's generally
Yeah.
lethal. So yeah. So I think that they've made the characters more generic, and it's up to the characters to sort of flesh out like what role they play within the group.
Yeah. And I know obviously I've got more of a Warhammer background as well, and I feel like the games in that one, because I think you touched on it there with like combat being lethal, it kind of dissuades you from getting into combats anyway. So you're less worried about the meta game of having the perfect raiding party for those combats. So I think in those styles of games you can have vastly different compositions of your party and your group of players compared to a dungeon crawl traditional RPG. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. If you think I'm way wide of a mark there, but
No,
I,
no. I mean, I, well, a game of D&D, excuse me, is it's very combat centric. I mean, the whole idea of progression is based around combat. Uh, Even in a very story driven game, it's maybe 50-50,
yeah,
right? Where 50% of it is story and like role playing encounters, and 50% of it is fighting. If you had a 50-50 game in Warhammer, your party would be lucky to make it out of the second session. Just because the consequences of combat are so like enduring, it takes forever to heal and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I think, yeah, that is a whole different beast. Uh, and well, you know, being a caster in a game like Warhammer isn't. It's not like there's such a random nature to the way magic works. You could try to cast a spell, but it might not necessarily work. And so maybe the melee like range type characters are going to be stronger overall in combat because their abilities are very predictable. I shoot at something, swing at something. Whereas the spell guy has to like try to generate his spell and then channel it and all this other stuff, and it goes through all these processes and then may ultimately fail, right? So I think that you get the big upside when it goes off
yeah.
because magic is super powerful, but the likelihood of it going off it that puts a lot of randomness into it, right?
Yeah, I think that kind of rolls nicely into the player side of party composition. And when you talk about playing a character like a wizard, where your damage output's going to be depending on the game. Obviously, in Warhammer, it's more random, which is still like more spiky. But even in a game like D&D, you're very front loaded if you use all of your spells. Well, you don't have the consistency compared to playing something like a barbarian, for example, where you once you start that raging, you stay the same throughout that combat, and that your job is to be there doing that and attracting the attention.
Yeah. I think they've done a better job in 5e in that now the wizard, well, all the caster classes have cantrips, so that effectively replaces their melee, their need to get into melee or use ranged or whatever, and it bases it off their statistic that is theoretically their 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 best stat, right? So it's not like your wizard has to like throw darts at something anymore or anything like that. And I mean, it's funny because I'm playing in a sort of a first ed-ish game of D&D at the moment using like one of the OSR rules. And the like at low level, the first level dude, aside from having 4 hit points, had like one spell.
Yeah,
So he spent, that whole time uh like avoiding combat and trying to do things that would help us but like not risking himself because like if the monster looked at him the wrong way, he was going to die. Um, yeah, and I think that they realized twofold. Like I think everybody acknowledges that the power curve in older D&D was like, you know, where the casters were really ineffective until they suddenly weren't ineffective, and then it didn't really matter what you had in the rest of your party because the caster just like gutted everything. One or two spells would just wipe out the entire encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, would you say that over the editions, party composition has got less important for D&D?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the necessity of like there was only one way to like open locks and find traps, and like if you didn't have a thief in your party and you got to a locked door, you were banging it down.
Yeah.
Like there was no other way of opening it up, right? Like there was and like even things like you found magic items, if you didn't have a wizard you couldn't identify them, right?
Yeah.
Or even detect magic or any of those things, right? You got a disease, if you didn't have a cleric or a druid, there was no curing the disease or removing a curse or any of those things. And I mean that still sort of exists in the current version, but it, it it's much more accessible.
Yeah.
Things like Lesser Restoration being a second level spell means that even if the players don't have a healer, that there's probably some third level healer type that they can come across. It's going to be much more common, right? Than
Yeah.
yeah. So they'll have bugs until then.
So as a player, then we'll talk about you and me specifically, and then cover some maybe archetypical players after that. But as a player, if you're making your character, how much do you think about the rest of the party? Do you all get together with your friends who are going to be in the party before you make your character? Do you come to a table with a rough sketch? How do you approach that kind of thing?
Well, I think the game master sets that tone in that, like, we'll use the example that we did when I suggested that we take our first session of our current game and make characters together. Just so that you guys chose to collaborate, it would be there. If you didn't choose, me particularly, I, uh, I don't know. I find if you're playing in the same group, you kind of fall into roles, um, and there's an expectation. So
Yeah.
sometimes there's the unpredictable people that just like randomly pick things. But for the most part, I'm not one of those people.
Would you say you would tend towards a specific type of character archetype, maybe?
Yeah. Well, so yes and no. I look at the characters that I've done in the past versus the characters that I've been playing lately. And well, I will always be sort of a damage dealer character. So obviously enjoy range classes a lot, but like in the last sort of 3 or 4 characters that I've generated, I've been like I'm in Kevin's current game of Ash. I'm a half vampire berserker,
Yeah.
and then before that, I was like a Amazonian paladin. So that's for me, that's sort of predictable, I guess, right? That's the type of character I like to play. But partially, I knew that the rest of the group, there's a couple guys that really enjoy playing casters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially in an OSR game, if we were all got 4 hit points, the
Yeah.
chances of us surviving the encounter is probably not very good.
Yeah. So I know for myself, I have an archetype I know that I fall into playing that I find easy to play. The more tanky kind of paladin esque type of character. Um, Not necessarily the human fighter, but like a paladin or an eldritch knight. That kind of thing I find relatively easy to do. I'm going to put myself in the middle of something, try and soak damage, deal a little bit, and have a level of magical support ability. I think we've discussed this already about my character in your current game,
Right.
where I'm playing a war domain cleric, but I'm not playing a cleric. I'm playing a fighter who has access to cleric stuff that should come into a game later on. And I
Yeah.
feel like that falls into that remit. And I try and push the bounds and I push myself as a player to be able to do something different. But that is generally my, if I'm playing in a new group like this one, it is a new group. Like we've got a couple of people who've not played D&D with before at all. Well, in fact, none of us have all played together before, other than myself and you're a game master.
Right.
And uh, playing the character I know I'll be able to do justice to is a relatively easy choice. And it also helped that it kind of filled like a rough hole that the party was going to have. When we started, it was going to be a 3-player party with
Right.
a wizard and a rogue were both locked in already. So in my head, we were missing like someone to hit stuff for consistent damage, someone to have access to the healing spells, and then someone to be able to take a hit. So I tried to think of a way to try and wrap that up into a nice bow and one package, which I think is going to work for the lower levels at least.
Yeah, I think your character was well chosen in that you met all those requirements. And I don't think you, I mean, we've talked about this. I don't think you're going to be penalized moving forward. I just think that at some point your character is going to evolve. Like you're going to become less effective as a just a straight up melee character. Doesn't mean you can't go in and melee when you have to, but your role might change depending
Yeah,
on what's going on. And when we added a fourth player to the group, he picked a warrior or a fighter. So uh,
yeah, that niche. I don't need to try and fill that niche as
that's
we
right.
move on.
And but you
Uh,
can't have too many guys that stand in the front,
yeah,
right?
um,
Especially with a rogue in the party.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like how I approach it, how you approach it. Do you want kind of archetypical plays do you think there are, or like personal examples you want to pull from of how other people would build the party? I know we've both got experience of I should say people who kind of really like that rigid structure of we need one wizard, we need one tank, we need. Do you think that's advantageous to have that kind of player in the party who's cognizant of all of those things? Or do you think it can be detrimental to the fun of the group in general? I don't know.
I don't think it hurts the fun, and it certainly covers your bases as far as there's not very many things that the game master is going to throw at you that somebody in the group isn't going to have something that's attuned to dealing with it. But you give up that specialization where you know the like heavy melee group is going to be really good at churning through like melee type encounters, right? But and the assumption is that that's probably the more common encounter when they start to run into more magical things, right? Like, uh, well, like we'll use, I guess, Coville's session from last week is a pretty good example, right? They didn't have a wizard. Well, they did, but it was like an NPC wizard that just cast Stinking Cloud every round.
Yeah,
Uh, and the other group had a wizard, so potentially, well, I think we agree that the session wasn't particularly good. Uh, if the game master had wanted to just sit there and gun down the party with the wizard, right, and just like chain fireball the chain,
yeah,
that would have been the end of that encounter because they really have no way of dealing with it, right? And if the encounter had been structured such that they'd put their meat shield guys up front and the wizard sat in the back, and they'd cut off access to the wizard, that wizard would have just sat there and burned the players into the ground, and there would have been absolutely nothing they could have done about it.
yeah. I think the chain of Acheron, that group of players, is actually a really good example of one of the things I wanted to touch on, both from both sides actually. So we can go back and forth on the DM perspective and the player perspective, I suppose, as it's going to make the conversation easier. But I think with the chain of Acheron, you have them. They're all playing something that they wanted to play that they thought was cool. Like they've all obviously done this at home. with what they wanted to do, with no like
Or they sat around the office and did, yeah, like they
yeah.
might have. Yeah, who knows, right?
Uh, so what I would say is that that party doesn't feel like it ticks all of the boxes. As you say, we don't have a wizard.
Right.
The cleric that they have is definitely not a life cleric type of bringing people back. King is more focused on damage dealing
He's a
as
wizard.
well.
He's a bad wizard. Like not Lars as a player is bad, but the character is an unoptimized wizard because all he
Yeah,
does is cast haste and fireball.
yeah. Um, and they're all playing something that they would enjoy. And I think that kind of ties into one of the things I wanted to cover as a game master perspective of, uh, it's then on you to make sure that your encounters are geared towards the party of players that you have. And I personally, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with exposing the weaknesses of the party, but it definitely comes down to what kind of game you're having and how we spoke about this in one of the previous episodes of how adversarial you want your game to be.
Right.
I don't think Colville's game is an adversarial game at all. I don't think he's scared to kill a member of the party, in honesty. I don't think if it happens, he'll be sad about it. He might be, sad for his friend whose character died if he really enjoyed it, but in the telling of the story, I feel like all of the characters are potentially expendable. But I don't know that if you challenge your party, as you say, had Colville done that, how far do if you're, so kind of, how do I summarize it properly? If your players turn up with that party, where's the line of, well, I'm just going to do this because I can, compared to, trying to,
So when he was building that encounter, when he chose to include a wizard on the other side, he he potentially, because of the level they're at and everything, he potentially was exposing a pretty huge weakness. And it would have made for a really kind of a crap game to have the enemy have a wizard and just burn off all their fourth and third level spells, fireballing the party until they just like munch them up. I mean, that exposes, I think, a huge issue with 5e as far as games go. But uh, yeah, so that's the other thing is that now we're seeing after fifth level, we're seeing the upside of having a cleric in the group, in that if you do screw up or something unfortuitous happens, you have the revivify, which isn't available to anybody else, right? I don't
yeah.
think the bard gets it. I think it's just the cleric that gets it. So if you don't have a cleric, there's no bringing dudes back.
I think Anna's character, the Illrigger, brought somebody back as well with Revivify. So maybe that I've not really looked into the Illrigger to be honest.
I
Um,
think in standard 5e terms, I think that is a restricted to the
yeah,
bring people back. The druids got the whatever the like reincarnation type spells. But yeah, so I mean, but the thing is that only is the cleric is if you screw up and somebody dies, but if everybody's just beating the tar out of the enemy, the fight never gets to that point,
yeah,
and you don't end up using a lot of your resources, right? You just pile onto them, and you have like four fills in the group that just go in there and just like munch things up.
yeah,
But if they get stalled out, or you know like the one thing that would be interesting, they don't have a wizard. And I mean, we'll just use them as a good example because they are a very melee heavy group. They have like one ranged, their goblin
yeah,
ranger is a ranged guy,
yeah.
and King has got some ranged attack spells, but like Anna's a paladin effectively, and Phil is a warrior, right? And the other guy is a
With
bard.
boots,
The
yeah,
other
the
Tom.
martial bard, and then um,
So
Leech is, I suppose, the only a range thing, but
right.
it doesn't seem overly optimized at the moment.
Yeah, that's a warlock. That I think
Yeah,
that's a class issue with the warlock. Um, so what happens if they run into like a dragon? Not a big dragon, but just a dragon, and the dragon decides not to stay on the ground. So then Phil is out of the party, then Anna's out of the party. There's nothing they can do, right, to engage this dragon that's just hovering over top of them, breathing on them. and then they're reliant on their range classes, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think as you level, the weaknesses of your party become more exposed. So the upside of the whole well-rounded, a little bit of everything, in that fight, like like as the game master, you even want to do that fight because, like you said in the last episode, there's characters that just sat around doing nothing.
Yeah.
So, if you've got this dragon hovering over top of you, breathing and tail whipping at you and stuff like that, right? What happens to the two melee guys?
Yeah. And I think that it comes down to that you've got to, for party composition, you really need to be playing with what type of game you're going to run before the characters are locked in. If you want to have a very adversarial combat tactical game,
Sure.
you've got to be upfront with that. Like, you couldn't play like a berserker tribe or like, some Viking longship crew where they all are just berserkers,
Right.
because that would be a cool game to play. And I think, just off the top of my head, you give them a longship and they go and raid the coast and get the bounty, and uh, it's very sandboxy and could be really good fun.
Well,
But
that would be interesting in mm, how would you put this? In a very specific setting, right?
yeah,
So a low magic game, like a Lord of the Rings 5e type game. Yeah.
that's what I was going to get to. Like, if your players buy into that and think it's a really cool idea, and then the first thing you do is have them encounter the wizard village.
Yeah.
They're pretty shit out of luck, to be honest.
Yeah, they get to they see this like stone tower, and they get there and it's like the Wizard Apprentice College. So there's got all these like first and second level dudes shooting firebolts at them and running around. It
Yeah,
would be a very intriguing fight, right? I think they would endure through it because they have the beef, right? They
yeah.
got hit points and stuff like that, right? And that's, I mean, th
Uh,
that's my issue at the moment, and that's something that like I've tried to address in our game, was that the casters have uh, I don't know, the game sort of after the point, well, at fifth level the game sort of gets out of control because your casters dominate the combat encounters because of their AoE spells. It's not even the fact. Like if the character had lightning bolt, they would have to go through a very specific situation to like line up the enemies to make it super effective. But like after fifth level, the wizard just sits there and lobs fireballs into the middle of the group, right? And they just hit everything. And so then you get into this sort of metagaming where the game master's like, for no particular reason, is spreading out the mobs so that and I think that makes for
I do think we need to do an episode on magic and fireball in particular, because I think we both have lots of thoughts on that. But I think that's like, we could easily fill up a 45-minute episode talking just about
I could
fireball.
rant for 3 hours on Fireball. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we'll put a pin in that one. That can go
Okay.
up on the poll for a
Yeah.
future episode.
Yeah, we'll put that on the dartboard and let people throw darts at it for a while.
um, so when if you've got a specific game in mind, and you've put your setting down in front of your players, and you're um, I'll fish from like the previous game we were playing in rather than the current one, 'cause I don't want any spoilers for what's coming, that kind of thing. But in your previous game, you laid out a really interesting setting where it was relatively magic light in that unless you were a member of the church of the country that the people washed up in, you weren't allowed to cast magic. It was forbidden.
Right.
So you didn't tell anyone that they couldn't be a magic user,
Right.
but you have these things in place which are going to control, and like the witch hunters and the church persecuting the people. And it was going to be very difficult for any of them to be a member of the church because they were all foreigners who washed up on the shore after a shipwreck.
Sure. Yeah.
So you'd engineered a very specific like group of circumstance where I think none of the players really bought into oh, I'm not going to use magic then, other than my character was different. I don't want to get it too much into that,
No,
but
no.
like,
They didn't. I think because they were some of them were new. The issue that they faced was they had not yet seen the consequences of
yeah,
choosing to use magic, right? So, and I mean, we didn't play long enough for
yeah,
that to rear its ugly head. Um, yeah, so it's not that you as from a game master to players, it's not that you can't use magic, but if you're not using like if you're using arcane magic of any sort, there's going to be a consequence, and the Inquisition type people are going to come looking for you, right? And they've got a stake with your name on it in the town square.
yeah,
And yeah, and so I think that that definitely was uh like if you're in a dungeon, well then who knows, right? Who like it's not like I'm handcuffing you, but if you're in town and you're like roaming around and you like or start to cast spells and stuff like that,
yeah,
you're going to create a reaction, and then your name is going to go on the poster, and then soon your face will be on the side of the milk carton.
yeah. Like, so where I was going with it was obviously like you're creating a set of restraints for the party to be built under, and then it's not necessarily you don't enforce it as a hard line. You let the players do what they want to do as a game master,
Yeah,
and then it's about building the encounters and the sessions. Like the overall meta story that you're trying to tell doesn't have to be affected by the party composition.
no,
It's the day-to-day encounters that I feel like you need to worry about there. So I don't like in that specific game. You as a game master, did you let the party composition, was it going to affect where you took the overall story and the arcs you took, or did you just like have the meta story in mind and then go from
no,
there anyway?
no, exactly. I just had the meta story, and then when I was looking at stuff like generating sessions, then I mean that's the essence of encounter building, anyways. You look at the at your existing party and the state they're in, so how much resources, because if like we sort of talked about this, I think in the last session where you were like, I blew my wad, and then we had a second encounter in the same day, and I didn't have any of my abilities left, right? So that's something as a if 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 your players do that, that might be something as a game master you like want to illustrate to them, is that perhaps that there might be more than one encounter in a given day, right? But that's a like that is a sort of a teaching moment as a game master, to just tell them you have to be super careful about how you use up your stuff. But yeah, when I went to make the encounters, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to like I had a bard and I had a ranger, I think, and a thief, and your character was a sorcerer. And so I limited the amount of ranged capability of the encounters, especially at lower level, because that's where that particular type of group is going to struggle a little bit more, right? Closing where they just get wrecked, closing the ground because they have no ranged.
Yeah. Like the interesting thing I found was that none of us could really be in a fight. It needed to be over in the initial round, or we were going to struggle. And I didn't help matters by playing my sorcerer like a fighter because I didn't want to cast magic because I didn't want to get burned at the stake.
Right. But
So,
I think at low level that didn't
oh
really.
yeah, like when you look, like my stats were pretty average across the board anyway, so I
Right.
wasn't really a better sorcerer than I was fighter at level 1 anyway, so it was irrelevant. But
And as the game master, knowing that that was the character you were playing, when I generated the counters, I wasn't generating encounters where I was expecting you to use your abilities. I was expecting you to whack things
yeah,
with your sword to keep your story going, right? So yeah, like I wasn't going to, like I said, at some point it would have come out,
yeah,
but I wasn't going to do, you had this sort of story arc you wanted to
let
to
play out in its
like
own. Yeah,
right. And so it's not, I don't think that's the game master's place to force your hand to tell to to bust up your story after two sessions. At You can choose at what point you want to reveal to the party
yeah.
what's going on.
I think. that's a good thing to come on to in party composition as a game master. If you have your players wanting to do something beyond the norm that isn't the meta party where you have that, I feel like you want to look at that as an opportunity to do something different. Like you don't have to change your meta story, but if you do have them all playing thieves, try and recruit them into a thieves guild. Give play into what they're trying to do. Use it all as an opportunity. I think would be a really good way to come at it. Um, I think that, say, touching that game again, my character gave you opportunities to do interesting things as a games master. In the game I was running for you and Daniel, the and Davina's character definitely gave me chances to completely change where I planned encounters to go and give you different things to let you have interesting stories.
Like adding the third character there definitely changed the dynamic, but I don't know that it changed the dynamic because of the choice of what character she was playing. It changed the dynamic because now we had three of us. And so instead of the two of us having to go around together all the time, now one of us may go do something and two of us might go do something, right? But the fact that she was a barber surgeon or like Dr. Frankenstein Jr. or whatever, right? I don't think that that really impacted the story at
Well,
all. What
I've as a game master, when the character came in, there was the same meta talk that we all had that it's set in the Warhammer Old World, so it's a very human centric civilization. You do have these variant races do exist. You can play them, but the setting is going to be in the Empire, so there's going to be prejudices at play for all of the different races. And obviously, you played an elf. Davina was playing a halfling, and Davina wanted to do stuff that was outside of the norm in the same kind of way as in your game. Like, if she plays it incorrectly, the witch hunters are going to come a knocking. And it was interesting to me that I tried to vary around the party. I never really got to specifically your character because I wanted to wait until we were leaving Altdorf into a wilds before your kind of stuff came in. But Daniel is a priest of Sigma, had his content was there for him to play. Davina's content was there for her to engage with. And I definitely tried to pick on the composition of the party in how I built the sessions. And I suppose because that was more sandboxy, the subplots changed depending on what
yeah.
characters you were going to play.
I think if you okay, in that game particular, when I picked an elf, I knew that I had to the onus was on me to watch out for myself. So, it's not like when I see the gang of we hate elves people coming down the street, it's my job to get out of there and not go and, stand in front of them and tell them that what their beliefs were wrong. And so, because I knew that it would just end poorly for me, uh, so I tried to emphasize the exotic nature of the elf within the world. Um, like I wouldn't tell the other character my name because elves don't trust humans, and so even though we spent I don't know what 3 months together, I just was like, I don't know that my character will ever trust him because he's a human.
Yeah. I think Um, one of the interesting things that I tried to do for that party was definitely I gave you a cast of NPCs to choose from. You were never going to get all of them in the same group, but I tried to give you choices, and this is something I wanted to move on for in the party composition conversation. But like having NPCs fill holes in the party. So your party was definitely lacking in like magical ability and some actual punch in combat because Daniel's character was very tanky. Yours very range focused. There was no one to really get stuck in. So I didn't give you the choice of being able to have like a wizard and a fighter and this other thing. I gave you a choice of which way you went, depending on which NPC was going to be with you. Um,
And I think the NPC we picked had nothing to do with his class.
yeah, it was definitely taking the story, but he did fill a
Oh,
decent hole, and
absolutely. But I mean, I don't think we were metaing it and thinking, oh, we need this
yeah,
or we need that or whatever. this was the character that we felt most connected to, the
Yeah.
NPC, and so he was the one that we ended up it ultimately hooking up with, right? And yeah, and I don't think it really hurt us.
No,
Or
I think that was one of the parts of my game I was most happy with. The way I use the NPCs to not just be the plug and play. Oh, we need a healer, so you get an NPC healer type thing. It was tying them into the story in a very meta way. That which story you guys chose to tell determined which NPC was there with you. And how do you feel about uh, as a game master? Are you just going to plug whatever gap the players have with an NPC, or do you let them struggle without it? Where how do you balance that?
oh, well, so this is actually a great point. So first of all, the NPC, if you choose to give the party an NPC that's going to join the party, so to speak, uh, two things. One, they become your voice, so that's super important in that, like, then you're able to feed them information. You're able to get involved in discussions that are happening amongst the players that you can subtly direct them or misdirect them or do whatever you choose. So I think that's really important to have that character in the group so that it's not so glaringly obvious when you just are outright telling them something, right? Yeah, so they're like, oh, I heard about this village in the woods that there's these people and that might mean nothing, right? It might just be a red herring, so the players are not automatically uh, they have to judge the information that they're getting from the NPC. But I think that NPC uh, you want it to maybe fill in a little bit of the weakness, but you don't want it to be dominant. It needs to be submissive to the rest of the party in that, like, it can't this is not about the NPC's game. This is
Yeah,
about the player's game. And, like we talked about with the last session of the chain, right? This like Deus Ex Machina type thing where the players are just standing around spectating while all these like big creatures were like romping around, like having their kaiju fight, and
yeah,
it just dominated the players. So your NPC, like in the first game, you guys got the elf druid,
yeah,
and so I put her in there because the bard. It seemed like the character that was playing the bard, when she chose the bard, didn't realize that her job was going to be probably to heal because she couldn't contribute to the like damage part of things, and so she was sort of a neutral damage character, but she wanted to cast spells. So the new player dilemma in that they didn't really see their role in the party, and when they picked it, they were they just they were kind of all over the place. And I mean that's I think that's inevitable.
yeah,
So I added the druid to the party so that the onus for solely healing the group. So I mean they were having a lot of when she should have healed the bard, like when the bard should have been healing, she was doing other things because she didn't realize the danger they were about to get in because they were really low on damage. And
yeah,
then players would be going down, and the players would be like, "Oh, I need heal," and she'd be like, "Oh, I don't have any spells left," because I used them all, like creating an illusion or doing something else or like
yeah.
whatever, right? And so I put the NPC in there so that the onus solely wasn't on the bard to be the only healer.
Yeah, so I kind of know your opinion on the druid as a healing class anyway, but I'm gonna front load the question maybe.
Sure.
So as an example of that, we were obviously going to be light on healing. It was something that the party was missing there. So if as a game master, do you give them a life domain cleric because that's the best healer and that's what they're missing, or do you give them a suboptimal choice to just take the edge off?
Um, Well, so the decision to give them a druid was the NPC wasn't going to be the healer. The NPC was going to be a supplemental healer, but the the druid brings all the other utility stuff to the table that the players were lacking. Well, they had a ranger, once again, it was a new player, and so I could mentor the ranger with the druid.
Yeah.
The druid be like, "Hey, maybe you should go do this, or maybe you should go do that," and it was not outside of the character of like a outdoor survivally type character to be having conversations and sort of teaching the newer player that that sort of role, right? It gives them sort of a confidant where if they're doubtful about something that they're going to do, they share something with the NPC so they can definitely go and have a conversation with the NPC, just like the healer, the bard, could have a conversation with the druid because they share that sort of similar role, right? So I think yes, the life domain cleric, the potential is the bard would just simply stop healing and rely on the life domain cleric to just be the de facto healer. And well, that's not terrible, right? That's one of the crucial points. And we were adding another like non-combat character,
Yeah.
right? So now we've got the like the we've got a really sort of ineffective combat group that's like supplemented with all these utility class characters. Yeah, and that potentially with new players especially could just blow up in your face. So I was just like, something like we talked about, like, and this is the GM side of party composition. Uh, If you're thinking about like giving out items to your party, strengthen your party's defensive abilities before you strengthen your party's offensive abilities. Because if you give them like magic weapons, then every fight just turns into a race because that's all they have going for them. Where if you give them utility items that are, increase their armor class or give them ability to like heal themselves or like, stuff like that, that gives on any given turn, they don't have to take a combat action, they can take some other action and it doesn't hurt them. So it gives them a little bit more variety as far as, what they can do and stuff like that. And so you can supplement weaknesses in your group aside from adding an NPC. You can fashion that by the items that you choose to hand out to the players, right?
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good point. And like looking at other ways outside of, like, obviously we touched on NPCs there. We touched on magic items. I feel like another good example would be I do it as depend on how your game is and where your setting is, but doing it like a Diablo style thing where you go back to town and this is a healer, so he give him some gold, give him some of your cut, and it's going to heal all your wounds. It's fine. Go to this
That's good in
person.
a static game where the
Yeah,
players aren't moving around, right? Yeah, absolutely. Where they have a base of operations.
yeah, and you have a wizard who can identify stuff, that kind of thing. And there's no
Yep.
reason why, dependent on upon your setting, if and it all goes to how much interaction you've had with your players when you've been building your world. But maybe there's a guild in every town where you're going to have the wizard's tower in every town maybe, and they can go and identify magic items, so you're not running into that pitfall. There's that way of doing stuff. There's obviously if be adding in the NPC. I think I definitely fall into the camp of if you've made this party composition, I'll give you some help, but I also want you to live with your choices. So if you choose to play a game with no healing, then you're going to have to grind through these dungeons in a different way. You're going to have to get smart about it. You maybe won't be able to clear out an entire dungeon in uh, in
Yeah.
2 or 3 sessions. Maybe you need to like figure out how you're going to fortify parts of it, hire some
Well, it
mercenaries to
makes for
help
a
you.
more gritty, realistic game.
Yeah, and maybe if you've gone magic heavy and like the type of party we were playing, maybe you need to go and actively hire people to be the meat shields. And that obviously that's a kind of feel we get in the current game that we're playing, that we hired Justin's character
Right.
because we were light on someone to stand in the front and take some hits. So obviously that's hiring a player character, so that's slightly different in that we didn't really have agency in what character we hired. It just so happens that it works out that there is a decent reason. It all worked out pretty well. But as a game master, you can do that. But as players, you can. indicate to a game master that that's the kind of thing you're looking to do. Like, we're looking to hire a lower level priest to come round and heal with us, and
Sure.
that it adds to the story. Like, it can add to the story of the game. That as a game master, I will give you, if you try and find this acolyte to come around and heal for you, I'll give him to you. But then I will actively try and take him off you in every encounter, and it's up to you to try and protect him to keep him alive. So whilst it may be the benefit that you now have in party healing,
Yeah.
it changes the way you have to play every one of those encounters. You might not be able to make optimal combat choices because you might have to focus on the crappy side of a mob that's trying to swamp your healer, and you can don't make the game, I think, revolve around these choices and these NPCs, but you can make it work in interesting ways.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it, that's the nature of the way you run your game. So I mean, the fact that you guys are traveling at the moment means that you don't have a base of operation. So it means that I have to be cognizant of what I'm putting up against you until you get the opportunity to like rest at the next stopover, right? And then you can take as much time as you want there, and then when you feel prepared, you can move out and continue to travel. Whereas if you were in a you had a the typical, we start in a little village and stuff happens around the outside of the village, right? The sort of classic Village of Hamlet, the iconic T1 first edition D&D module where there's a druid in the center of town and there's a wizard and a fighter that are building a tower in there, like, so all the resources are available to the players. Yeah, but it that also consumes a lot of their wealth,
Yeah,
right? So these people aren't going to go on adventures with them, but if they come back and they've got bugs, then the druid will cure their bugs, right? Or
yeah,
the wizard will identify the chest of stuff they bring back, and there's potential for someone who wants to like buy their stuff and stuff like that. So I think that really that's the game master is choosing that aspect of the setting, and that's going to dictate. But when the players like wander off somewhere, so like they leave their base and they go and they investigate the moat house, for instance. Yeah, you're right. If they don't have a healer, then they're going to deplete the resources and they're going to have to make the decision, hey, you know, we need to rest, but this isn't a safe place to rest. So do we go back to town? Do we like wander off and set up, like a half mile away from the moat house? And so, yeah, and as the game master, you can choose to exploit those choices if you want, if you think it makes the story more interesting. Because certainly the the sort of growing sense of urgency from the players is interesting dynamic when they get into a fight and it doesn't go quite the way they thought and they deplete a lot of the resources and they're really weak, and then you hit them like right again, right, like right after, with something else,
yeah.
and then that makes them super nervous because got no spells, I got none of my daily use abilities and all this other stuff, so that do the players run away, uh and
Very rarely.
that's something you have to like take into consideration, right? Because lots of times they don't see it. That's the issue. That's the like sort of whole uh, you know capturing the player mechanic. The players assume that you've presented them the scenario that there's a way out of, and
Yeah,
that's maybe more inexperienced players see that, where every situation they feel like they're just uh, probing to find out like where like what they should be doing, rather than the DM that just dumps the encounter on them, and then there is no, there might not be a solution. The new player always assumes that the game master has built in that that solution into it. They just have to figure out what it is, right? Whereas your more cagey, experienced player realizes that this is the game master just trying to pummel the hell out of the players,
yeah.
right?
Well, so I think a good way to try and wrap this up, since we're coming on for almost an hour now. But like going through obviously the party composition, we touched on like obviously in older editions of the game. If you're playing third edition, I think there's different requirements to that party compared to if you're playing Pathfinder, if you're playing D&D, if you're playing 5e, sorry, compared to like a Warhammer or a Call of Cthulhu. But I don't think you should necessarily feel constrained. If you've got something that you really want to play, make sure you try and explain it to everyone. Obviously, you don't want to step on people's toes and take away from their fun. Like, don't,
Know the people you're playing with.
yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
If you don't be the third thief who's a kleptomaniac who just wants to steal from all of the other thieves,
Yeah.
unless the other players are on board with that as well.
Yeah, that's the like Wang Rod, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, feel free, but I'm pretty sure we had this conversation a while ago now. But I think we're talking about the thief who steals the holy cleric's item, holy symbol, so he can't cast cleric spells anymore. So until he ransoms it back, I can't remember where this story came from. It might have been a Colville story,
I
actually.
think it is.
Yeah. And I was
Where the
like,
player just got uninvited from the sessions
yeah,
because and this was his, the quote, "I'm just playing my character."
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, there gets to be the point where I'm just playing my character when I smash your skull in your sleep.
Yeah. And
Because,
that problem is that when you go from the "I'm just playing my character" to you've irritated Chris to the point where Chris actually like goes and smashes your head in the sleep, to like Chris now has a like it's hard to separate what's happening in the game
yeah,
from like you just being irritated with this person in general, right? Yeah, and I think that's we've played with people that had what maybe be termed idiosyncrasies as far as, and you have to take that in consideration. They like if they don't want a second person, if they're playing a wizard or a rogue or whatever, and they are that that they strongly feel like that when they're doing roguey things that the spotlight is on them
yeah,
as another player in the group, then why would you infringe on their fun? There's
yeah,
lots of opportunities within the game for you to find your niche. So like, but that then if you're playing with a group that nobody cares, and everybody's just even in the example you said with everybody playing rogues, they're not all going to be the same type of rogue. Somebody's going to be an
no,
assassin, somebody's going to be a pickpocket, somebody's going to be a thug and so forth, right? So everybody finds their niche, but
yeah,
intentionally doing the things that somebody else is doing, just like that strikes me as you're just doing it to irritate them.
yeah.
And
And
like,
that there's no once you hook onto it, we'll run with that idea of the thieves guild. There's nothing I always think of the Remini feast setting, the Riftwar and Midden Camp. I think, yeah, I can't remember.
yeah, the
Uh,
magician's
yeah,
apprentice or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. You've got the mockers in that setting, and they're gonna have their enforcers. So there's no reason why you can't play a battle master and be an enforcer in the Thieves Guild.
Yeah.
That it all fits. You tie in your backstory into this, and maybe you take skills
Well,
that
like a
might,
bard. A bard is
yeah,
perfect in that, and the bard is kind of roguey. They got some fighty ability, they got some spell using ability, and they absolutely could be a member of the Thieves Guild, right? And the part of that composition. And so everybody finds their role that they're going to play, and that's the advantage of the game master sitting them down at the table in the first session and them being able to talk it out. Him handing them the document saying, "This is what the game's going to entail," and then the
yeah,
players going, "Oh well, it would be kind of cool if we're
and
not all assassins."
yeah, and I think that can grow. Like if three people sit down at a table and all say simultaneously, "Oh, I was thinking of playing a rogue," you can roll with that. You can have like maybe as I said, like if you've got a party of five, you've got your wizard who's gonna be like the Caleb kind of character from the Mighty Nine from Critical Role. He's definitely a roguish character, but he's a wizard. You might have that battle master enforcer, or maybe even a barbarian or some kind of fighter.
Yeah, the Fafhrd
Or
and the
the
Grey
yeah,
Mouser thing where you
yeah,
have the big barbarian dude who's the like buddy bodyguard of the like little roguey dude, right? Yeah.
yeah. And then you have you can have your assassin, your typical thief, and then there's like the shadow magic-y type thief as well. So there you've got your party of five. They all do stuff. As long as one of the rogues picks up some form of ranged weapon, I feel like I could make that work relatively well as as a
Oh
game
yeah.
master. I'd like, as long as the assassin can use some kind of ranged weapons, I feel like it was enough there for me to work with as a balanced party. Yeah, you're missing your healer, in some sense, but
I
if
don't
they're
feel like players, when they're making their characters, intentionally are trying to sabotage themselves,
no,
but they always have some sort of idea of what they want to do. And then, like we were talking about, there's nothing to say that during the course of their adventures, if it becomes glaringly evident that there's like a weakness, the game master can't supplement it with an item, you know, or NPC that frequents, that makes appearances, or even somebody that like you said, we go and employ somebody that deals with our weakness, but like low level, those weaknesses are not evident, not as obviously evident. But as you get to like fifth level, especially in D&D, fifth to seventh level, the gaping holes in your strategy as a group start to rear their head, right? And then at that point, then the players have to make some choices, and if the players don't make choices, then the game master has to sort of like tinker behind the scenes and change things up a little bit so that that the players are just, because ultimately I'm there to present a scenario that's fun for you to interact with.
yeah,
So if all you're fighting is wizards casting fireball, or like AoE spells, like clouds and stuff like that, yeah, that's just going to get frustrating for the players because it's obvious that I'm taking an adversarial role, and then I've evaluated your party and this is the weakness, and I'm just going to just sit there and I am going to like pounce on the weakness every opportunity until you guys deal with it, and that just seems
yeah, and I feel like when you get to a point where players start talking about having to multi-class, I think that's when you've failed as a DM.
right.
Once you start making them rethink the character they wanted to play, or maybe not, maybe multi-class is a bad example, but like
There's games like
maybe I should,
Pathfinder.
yeah, maybe I should stop playing this character and can we write in a different character to the story? Because I think that's a failing as a DM. I think if that happened in a game I was running, I would feel like I'd messed up, and
Right.
I'd never want my characters to not play the character. I never want my players to not feel like they can play the characters they want to play, and I want them to feel like they're struggling because they're not. Players aren't stupid. Generally, they know when they have a weakness, so you're gonna push those boundaries a little, but I don't think you're gonna like if they have no magic users and all have really really low saves. You're not gonna cast sweep and go and slit all of the throats at night because
Right.
like ultimately, if I want to win, this is going to be a running theme of our show. But if I want to win, a vortex opens up and you're all sucked into hell and die.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, so are you going to make camp for a night? Right, okay. Well, it was a dragon moot and 50 dragons came, and what are you going to do now? Roll initiative, cool. If I want to win, I can,
That's right.
but I don't feel that that's
You have
winning.
all the pieces in the toolkit, right? Like if you choose to bring them all out at oh well,
Yeah,
you guys are first level and you're going from one town to the other, but you run into a beholder, and instead of using instead of the old beholder with the eye stalks cut off, so it doesn't have any of the good eye stalks, it has these eye stalks cut off, but it's all the bad eye stalks. All it can do is just disintegrate you and death ray you, right? Oh
yeah,
well, geez, that seemed like a really great encounter.
yeah.
Right, that was awesome. That was a memorable session. So what are we playing next week?
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of those things where you it's it's not even a fine line. If you want to win, you can, but I don't think that's winning. So there you
Well,
go.
for some game masters, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just where people. there'll be lots of videos and podcasts that talk about the different player uh, archetypes, and like I said, we've mentioned it here, the Wangrod player. There's a Wangrod DM as well, and just tell him you don't want to play in the game. It's probably going to work out better all around.
I think the Wangrod game master is telling his players he doesn't want to have people play his games because suddenly after the third session, when no one turns up, he can't be all that surprised. He's like mission accomplished. I managed to chase all my players away.
Yay! I don't get to play D&D anymore. Fun. Okay. Any last parts you wanted to touch on party composition? Anything you feel like we've missed from any perspective,
I
or
don't
just
I
in
don't
general?
yeah, I don't think so. I think we've beat it to death.
Okay, that's good. So we're basically at an hour now, so we'll close out then. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed talking about it. We're gonna keep trying to keep this on a 2 week schedule and have an episode coming out. You can always watch us on YouTube, on the Dice Hate channel on YouTube. You can listen to a podcast on our SoundCloud, which is Dice Hate again. We're also on the iTunes store. I think I've got it on Spotify and Google Play as well. But I was just making some quick notes while we're talking about ideas for the next show. So I put Fireball in there. So we'll put that on the poll. If you want to hear Greg rant for a 3 hour show instead of an hour, vote for Fireball. The other thing I thought would be interesting to talk about was the meta story and that that concept. So I know I mention it a lot, and it's something that gets touched on, but trying to lay out what it is and how that can play in. So that's going to be the poll for our next episode.
Dan, feel free to add if people have something that they want us to address,
Yeah,
then
you can
absolutely just put it in the comments, and I guarantee you we have some opinions on it.
definitely, like, you can email us at dicehate@gmail.com. You can email us at info@dicehate.com as well. You can find us on Facebook if you just want to comment on the Dice Hate page there. You can message me on Facebook, DM me on Twitter. There's loads of different ways to get in touch. It's all in the show notes and comment section. Even if you want to leave a comment on the YouTube video, I try and respond to all of them. If it's specific to Greg's knowledge, I'll reach out to him and get answers for you as well. But yeah, anything like that. We're on episode 2 now. We did a 0, which we kind of wanted to start again, so that's why we're an episode behind. If you listen to all of them, I actually messed up Greg's audio and couldn't do it in the podcast format, so that's why it was episode 0. Um, yeah, I'm gonna look at. We were gonna do a giveaway on this one, but then I didn't check what stock we had in the store to know what we're gonna give away. So next show, if you listen to that one, will definitely be something that we'll be giving away. Whether we start doing a dice set, maybe, because I know there's some nice dice sets in there. Maybe speak to Gord if he wants to sponsor us with a set of dice, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Uh, he loves his dice. Can't stop talking about him. But yeah, if you want to meet us in person, head over to Calgary and come in the Sentry Box. We'll happily talk D&D and other role-playing games with you there. You can watch Greg play. Well, are you still playing in Kevin Madison's game?
I am. Dungeon Musings Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. We're playing Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea.
Yeah, that's going well still. Everyone having fun, not antagonizing any paladins with your half vampire.
Well, I think I was, and then I was sick last week, so I missed like 2 sessions.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm eager to get back to playing my half vampire berserker and questioning the paladin's choices.
If you want to hear about me playing in Greg's game, I do a player journal because we play every Tuesday. So if you tune into our YouTube channel on Wednesday mornings, generally, I have my YouTube player journal up there, so you can follow on with what's been happening in that. But that's about everything, folks. So thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content, leave some comments. Let us know what you've been playing, what your thoughts are on party composition. Make sure you subscribe to a channel. Tick the little bell icon if you want notifications of when more videos come up. And yeah, get in touch. And thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.